Welcome back to MFO, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. I've made the long drive back from Virginia after a completely disastrous tournament on the James River. Might as well say this right now. Congratulations to Keith Pouchet. He had a phenomenal week on the James River, and congratulations, quite honestly, to Major League Fishing and the Invitationals for putting on another great event that was seen by a lot of folks on live over the weekend. All these great things that they did, and just a miserable week for me. I gotta say, it's embarrassing to come out and have to do these videos, but as I've said, my goal here is, even when they are terrible, I want to be able to share with you the mistakes that I made, and we all try and learn from them. So when we come back, I'm going to share with you some things that I've thought of in that long drive home about where I went wrong. We'll be back right after this, guys. Welcome back to Mark Fisher Outdoors, everybody. I'm Mark Fisher. So let's talk about the James River, and I'm going to kind of include the things that I put in my practice recap. I focused on the Chickahominy River because the experience that I have on the James and the information that I have is that the Chickahominy is the by far the best area on the entire James River. And again, it's such a long fishery, going from Richmond all the way to Chesapeake Bay, 100 miles of length in terms of getting to where you're going. And what it means is, when we take off out of Osborne Landing and drive to the Chickahominy, you're talking about a 45-minute drive just to get to the mouth of the Chickahominy, and then another 18-mile drive up the Chickahominy. So you're burning an hour of drive time there and an hour back. So on a 7 or 8 hour tournament day, 2 hours are gone just driving. And that was the decision that I made, because in my opinion, the fishing was better because of that F1 stocking program that happened years and years and years ago. Well, the reality is that, in my opinion, I think what's happened over all of those years is that so many tournaments go out of Osborne that the reality is that there are good populations of good quality fish throughout the river system at this point, and it is no longer the Chickahominy is the only place to catch good fish on the James River. If you look at the live, you can see that there were guys that were doing very, very well, and they weren't in the Chickahominy. Whether Appomattox, actually fishing up north going towards Richmond, and just a lot of the backwater areas up near that time. So bottom line is, the good quality fish were available without having to make an hour-long run to the Chickahominy, and it gives you a lot more fishing time. And my level of talent and skill to have a 7-hour tournament day and not and cut that short by 2 hours because of driving, that was a mistake on my part. I think the other thing that absolutely hurt was just the way the tide's set up in this tournament. The James is a place where, when you find fish in a certain place or a certain kind of a situation, whether it be hard targets as currents moving through, you can focus on that type of a target or that specific area and get right in that area, or fishing those types of targets. But the problem is that, for me, the places that I found were on tides that we just didn't have during the tournament hours because of the changing tides. And I did not adapt to that at all very well. And so that was a mistake that I made. And I would catch, there were places that I found that I did well in practice, and then when I went at a different tide, I might catch a few, but they ended up being literally 12 to 14-inch fish instead of 3-pound fish. And that can happen, when you're fishing, in an area. We talked about this in the practice recap. When you're fishing an area that when it's low tide and it's condensed, you go in there and there's a lot of fish in there. When you're fishing on a high tide, you might still catch some fish because not every fish is going to leave just because it's high tide, but the quality of the fish might go down to the point where it's just a few little small ones there, and that's what I ended up getting. The other thing that was a big factor is I had a stretch of cypress trees that I feel like in practice I did a really good job. I went and just threw a wacky rig Cinco without a hook behind these cypress trees. The fish would position themselves behind the cypress trees as the tide was going out, and boy, I would just mark that tree and mark that tree, but didn't set the hook on any of these because there wasn't a hook, and had them marked. I'll be darned if when I got there in tournament, the water was, I mean, these trees barely had any water on them, and again, very, very few fish during the tournament, and the fish that I did catch were small. Just a really, really terrible tournament. And by the way, two other things to kind of bring up here. Number one, you'll notice that there's no footage because of those long drives. My camera's 45-minute driving down a river. Each day my cameras kind of got jostled to the point where I didn't get any really good footage of my fishing. There weren't that many fish to have anyway, so I don't really have any actual footage to show you. The other thing that adds to this frustration, so I got a rental house near the Chickahominy, so that during practice I didn't have to drive a long way. I could just put the boat in right there at the Chickahominy. So during the tournament, what I was actually doing was getting up at 4 a.m, driving my truck and boat from the Chickahominy up to Osborne for an hour, getting in the boat and driving back an hour to the Chickahominy to fish for 6 hours, driving the boat back to Osborne to weigh in, getting in the truck and driving back to the house to sleep, and then the next morning getting up at 4, driving. A lot of driving for not a lot of fishing, and definitely not a lot of catching. My worst finish, and like I said, kind of embarrassing to be here talking about it, but wanted to share, my thoughts, certainly interested in yours. I did want to also say that a lot of you have signed up for the virtual bass tournament. Obviously, being out of town last week, I haven't gotten anything back to you guys, but I will be working on that this week to get you the rules and your boat numbers and things like that. I am going to hold off on the boat numbers until we get a little closer, but it'll come out this week, so that you'll have your boat numbers, and we'll get going on our virtual bass tournament. So make sure to check out that video if you're interested in getting into that. That was not last Friday, but the Friday before. Check that out. And guys, we will see you tomorrow for another episode of Mark Fisher Outdoors. Take care, everybody.